everybody, and welcome to another episode of Book Goodies Author Podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Carney, and today I'm pleased to have as a guest Elizabeth, who writes some humorous but fun chick lit. And no, it's not the chewing gum.
Yes, so be careful how you spell it.
So Elizabeth, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, first I want to say thank you. I am so excited to be here today. My name is Elizabeth Dudak, and I'm the author of the book What the Heck Deck. It's a romantic comedy slash chick lit. I live in a suburb of Chicago, and I've been writing probably all my life, but this is my first venture into writing a novel.
Okay.
And so I started it about 5 years ago. I worked full time, and I have a family and everything, so I've been writing this on and off during my free time, and this is what I came up with, and I hope everyone enjoys it. It's a very easy beach read for the summer, or it's not Jane Austen or David Copperfield by any means. It's just a light read, and hopefully people will enjoy it.
Well, I know I'm looking forward to reading it. So.
Oh, good. Like everyone who has said it's a very fast read. So that's good, because life's too serious, and so this is something to take your mind away from it, if even for a few hours or a day or two.
I like it. That's what I used to call. That's what I used to call movies. I called movies the certain genre of movies are the leave your brain at home movies.
And this would be one of them. This would be that book. There's nothing trying to figure out the healthcare situation or anything like that. It's just a very easy, fun read. Cool. I hope that people find it that way.
Cool. So now you said you've been writing all your life. What did you start out writing?
Well, I mean, I had that basic teenage angst where I would write poems about woe is my life, lock myself in my bedroom type thing. But it truly was my way to cope with what was going on in my little teenage world. And then when I had gotten into college, I majored in political science, and I always did better on the essay questions than the multiple choice, because I knew I could they can ask me a question and I could write around the question if I didn't know the answer. I had a very good skill that way. But then when I had gotten married and I started to, and I was an at-home mom, I started to write a few articles for magazines here and there. I wrote a poem that was published. I was a columnist for local newspapers in our area for about 7 years. And then I also wrote letters to the editor, anything I could do to write. I just always wrote on my free time. And, being a mom of two toddlers, or a toddler and a preschooler, it was a little difficult sometimes to fit that in, but I always needed that to do. So I just always had stories in my head, and then, which sounds kind of like voices in my head, but I really did have stories in my head. And I thought one day I've got to get them out. And so I sat down and I started writing in Nano Month. Are you familiar with that at all? Yeah,
NaNoWriMo. I have tried it twice.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in my business, fourth quarter is the busiest time of year.
Yes.
So I'm like, I can't do it. And I'm like, can't you do it in March or something?
Well, the first time I did it, I actually had foot surgery, which made it easier. And that sounds weird, but I had some time off.
You can't do anything else.
No. So I did it. I started 5 years ago, and I did it for 4 years in a row. Last year, I did not complete it because I was editing my book, so it was hard to edit. But the years before I did, and this has kind of been, I started out with the main characters being FBI agents and realized I knew nothing about being an FBI agent. And so to go back to the write what you know, it takes place in a middle school, because I've worked in middle schools for about past 6 years in the front office capacity. So, so I wrote what I know, and I've also, let me say this too, is I have had a lot of, I've written articles that were not accepted by magazines, and I've taken a lot of writing classes through the years as well. So.
Okay.
So but then I just decided to write what I know, and I like humor, and I like stories between two people who may be seen kind of opposite, and that's sort of what this came up with. So
Well, and that sounds like a wonderful process that you went through. You wrote what you didn't know, and you learned from it instead of being grumpy about it. And you came up with something that you're comfortable with. So for those of you that don't know, NaNoWriMo is where you pledge to write 30,000 words towards a novel during the month of November. And they have a whole website and a whole support forum and a lot of other things. And you report in with how many pages or how many words you've written. And the point of it is to get you into the habit of writing every day.
That's right, and it's actually 50,000 words, I think.
Oh, okay.
And you're supposed to just purge and don't self-edit. Just keep writing. And it really does get you in there. At first, because I'm a very much of a self-editor as I write. I mean, I'm very, very much like that, too much. So this really got me out of the habit of doing that, because then you just get your ideas out. Right. And the ideas are the crust of any good novel, so... and the whole starting point of writing. So that it really, really had helped me. It's a great exercise. It really is.
Well, and again, it's mostly for those, it's not going to be for people who are already writing every day, unless you want to do a challenge to see if you can create something brand new.
That's right.
In a short period of time. It's more for the rest of us who are, we have another job, we have family, we have whatever. And it's to let you let go, and it's like taking a writing course online.
It is,
without having to leave your house. Because you said you've taken writing courses. I've gone for writing courses 3 or 4 times. I took, I went to college for creative writing, and then I went for literature. And I'm like, well, all in the hopes that it would force me to write.
Absolutely.
And because I did it when my kids were young, I never got through it. So I was the master at signing up for college semesters and quitting mid-semester.
Oh, I bet there's a big following of that.
Because life just gets in the way.
It does. And that's what I've always said. And it is absolutely true. And the other great thing about it is there is a certain amount... I felt like perhaps how a marathon writer feels. I mean, I'm sorry, a marathon runner feels. You train and train and train, but then when you get to the point where you're done, and that's sort of what nano writing was for me, is I finally got to use the skills that I had been trying, going to class for and everything, and not looking back as I ran towards that finish line, just the purpose of getting to that finish line. So,
yep, just doing it.
Right.
So,
right, absolutely.
That's awesome. Now you said you didn't do the last nano because you were editing your book. Now, did you self-edit, or did you have an editor come in and help you?
Well, I had a couple things. Like I said, I'm very much of an editor in my own mind. So I edited it a few times, and I have a really good friend. In fact, I dedicated part of this book to her because she was fantastic. I would send her things, and I say, okay, this is what I edited. Could you look it over? And of course, then I realized I am not a good editor, because then she would edit it then she'd come back and say, well, no, this, and this. And so between the two of us, we finally had something that I could present. And that's what I needed. Of course, I still had a long way to go. And that's where Orange Hat had come in. And they had an editor on staff that then took what I had and edited some more. It was the editing process it takes a long time. But what I really appreciated with Bridget from Orange Hat was the fact that she never lost my voice. And, I know it is absolutely important. And it's something that I didn't even have to fight for it, but I know other authors who really have to fight for their voice. And my book is written in first person. And the woman has a real quick wit about her. So I didn't want to lose that in any way. She has a certain way of talking. It does take place in Chicago, so a lot of her voice is Chicago voice, and it was really important for me to keep that. So Bridget did a great job of editing without losing that voice.
So tell us how you came about to, instead of self-publishing, you're using a small publisher.
Yes.
And tell us how you came to get that relationship.
Well, I had submitted my book to probably about 42 different places and agents and publishers and everything. Some had gotten back to me and said, well, if you do this, this, and this, we'll consider it. But the this, and this was, again, losing my voice, and I was like, that's not the story.
Right.
Some had said, thank you, but no thanks. Don't even know if they looked at it. Some had said, well, this is, too much for me in this area. So when I was working at this middle school, a teacher there was friends with the publisher, Shannon of Orange Hat. Mm-hmm. And she said, you may want to try this one. They're they're smaller and they're just starting out, but that might be an advantage to both of you. You both can learn this way. And I thought, sure. So I submitted to Shannon, and she had come back to me and said, absolutely, we'll take you. And this was like in July, and I said, well, thank you, but let me think about this a little bit more.
Right.
Because in my mind I thought, well, maybe more, if she's interested, maybe a more established one was, and I was being kind of like playing, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, this is where the universe is taking me. Mm-hmm. After she said yes, I did not submit it the way I thought I would to I actually took 6 months to think about it, and I kept going back to her. And again, life got in the way.
Yeah.
So, my daughter graduated from high school, and things were just happening that I didn't have the time to really think about it, other than kept going back to Orange Hat. And so finally in January I had said, you know what, let's go for this. I think this is where I'm supposed to be, and I think we can grow together, and I think this would be wonderful. So it was probably a risk on her part and a risk on my part, and the risk has seemed to paid off, and I couldn't be more happier.
Well, and I don't know if you would have found your way to me anyways, but Shannon from Orange Hat is the one that contacted me.
Absolutely.
To put together this podcast. So,
And she's been fantastic. She's just one of the nicest people I ever want to meet. And you don't, and I'm not lost in her publishing. I'm not just a number. I'm not just another new author. I am Elizabeth Dudak,
Right.
So, and that's really important. And everybody I've worked with there has been wonderful. So I always believe that the universe unfolds the way it should. Mm-hmm. And I think that I was meant to be with Orange Publishing, and maybe vice versa. So It's been a really, really good fit.
Well, and that's important, because there's a lot of authors that are still out there looking for, the big publisher to buy their book. And you have a lot more options these days, self-publishing included, but there are a lot more small press that mm-hmm. may be well suited to your lifestyle and your type of doing things. A lot of the big press don't have the marketing system in place that you think they're going to.
Right.
And you're going to end up marketing your book anyway.
Absolutely. And that's really important. Like I said, I feel comfortable going to the publisher, and I don't even have to go through an administrative assistant or the assistant to the administrative assistant. I go right to the publisher and say, look, I'm not real comfortable with this book signing. What do you know? Or I'm over the moon about this one, So there's that type of communication that you don't get for bigger publishing, and that's the biggest advantage. And plus, she is, Orange Hat has a lot of young people, mm-hmm. which is great, and they're all new to this, and we're both learning together. Which, how wonderful is it to learn together?
Yep.
So I couldn't be more pleased.
And the other thing, too, is that the problem with a large publishing house is, like you said, from the queries that they answered, were, you have to fit to their style.
Right.
And absolutely. There are more and more authors out there now that don't like that type of gatekeeping. Most of the people I'm talking to are like, I want to write my book this way. And right. I don't want it changed. And I have a friend that was published by a big publishing house, and they made him use a title he didn't like. They created a cover he didn't like. They locked up his manuscript so that he can't use it for anything else. Mm-hmm. And, when they said they were going to put it in all these bookstores, their idea of putting it in all bookstores was to put one copy in every other bookstore.
Oh, yeah. And, that's what I don't get, too. And, this may change in the publishing because of all these different, like my book is like I've said, is a cross between really romance and chick lit. It's not one or the other,
Right.
And writers in themselves are kind of square pegs, so why try to fit us in these holes,
Yes.
And that's what I think Orange Hat knew, and I'll admit, there are times when I got a little temperamental. I know, hard to believe a writer would be temperamental. And Shannon's been very, very pleasant about that, and very patient and very everything, and you lose that sometimes with the big publishers,
Right, and you have to have an editor that you feel comfortable with. Like you said, you have a friend that's an editor for you, and then they provided you with an editor that you were comfortable with, which is probably even more important than the marketing and everything else, because you need, like you said, your book needs to sound like you want it to sound. It needs to not fit somebody else's preconceived notion of a formula.
That's absolutely true, and writers are not editors. I mean, they're not.
No.
Because writers are creative and sometimes go over the top. And, even in the back of my book, I used the word droolicious. I made up that word,
Right.
So it's sort of, that's the type of people that writers are. Now, editors are a little bit more like, no, you can have fun with the English language to a certain point,
Right.
So, yeah, I really, and she was young too. Bridget was young, and, I think this was she was new to this as well, and it was great. It was refreshing. And I wrote in a young voice, and so she kind of kept me on that voice. So that was really nice.
Well, and the other thing, too, to remember is that you, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay. It happens to me all the time.
Don't we love that?
Yes.
I know what it was. It's you're so close to the story.
Right.
That
right.
you know what the story is supposed to say. And
Absolutely.
you think it's saying it, and you need that other person to look at it and read it and go, I don't get it.
That's right. And that did happen. There was a reference in my book to Forum magazine, and I don't know if you know what Forum magazine is. It's a porno magazine for men. There was a reference to it, and she didn't know what it was, and she's a younger woman, so then I made it more like Playboy, so it was general. So, so that type of thing, that you're right. She said, I don't get that. What's Forum magazine? And then I thought, well, if she doesn't get it, I should make it a little bit more universal, the reference. So,
yep. And those are the kind of things that as writers, we think we're putting in a cute little witty thing, and
that's right.
People come back and go, that didn't work.
I know, and that's the same thing too. Bridget's that there was a few things that Bridget was like, well, okay, and I'm thinking, okay, it didn't go over. Let's try to reword that, or let's take it out.
Let's fix it. So.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's also really important for self-published authors to understand. And I've had a few authors in the past that has been something they've emphasized. Make sure you do work with an editor.
Absolutely.
And a real editor, not just a copy editor that's going to go through and fix your grammar.
That's right.
But an editor that is going to get into your story, know what your story is about, and be able to tell you what doesn't work.
That's right. Because even if, I know of a few writers that actually that's what they did for a living, was they were editors at a publishing company, and then thought, well, and then they wrote. And they were good writers, but they wrote as writers, not as editors, and that's the two different roads there. So I absolutely agree. I think having an editor, somebody look over and find your voice and all that is very, very important.
Now, you said you've taken some writing classes. Were they like critique type classes, or were they just doing writing exercises, or did they encourage you to write like full short stories and then have everybody critique each other's writing?
Well, it was actually a mixture of both. I took some continuing education classes at local colleges that had, this is how. I took a dialogue class, which was really important for me because I was so descriptive for so long, and dialogue was difficult. Now dialogue's a little bit easier, but this class, all we did was write dialogue, and the the professor would say, go to a coffee house and sit down and just listen to conversations and see how they really are, which was a great exercise. And then I took classes on writing description because as much as I thought I was good, I really wasn't. It was more of a, this is red, this is blue, instead of saying, something a little bit, so I was very rote about it. So they've been a mixture of all, and yes, they've all had critique, which is hard, but it's so important because, again, as a writer, you're in your own head, and it's hard. You need to hear other people's opinions. I did take a couple of online classes through like Writer's Digest and things like that when time would not permit me to actually attend a class. And there was an emailing back and forth, and that was tougher because tone is lost in emails.
Right.
So sometimes you would get criticism. I'm like, well, that lady really doesn't like me. And, it probably is not true, but tone is so lost in it. Where for me, it was easier going to the class because then you could see them and you can have discussion back and forth and it's immediate, So, yes, both, and that's the big thing about being a writer that I did not have, but I've learned to have is a tough skin. I am a super sensitive person, and that was probably the biggest lesson for me is to get a tough skin because, the people that are doing the critiques, majority of them are looking out for you. They're not trying to be nasty,
Yep, they are a little representative sample of who would be out there reading your book, and you'd rather hear it from them before you publish it.
Oh, you're right.
Rather than later. One of the things frustrating to me, like in one writing class, I don't write poetry. You said you did some when you were in high school. I don't write poetry. And one of the classes, the assignment was you had to write 3 poems. And, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was really struggling with it, and I thought I wrote a really cool poem, and then the teacher circled one line and said, you need to develop this poem from this line. And I'm like, wait, it was the last line of the poem, and now you want me to take that line and make a whole new poem out of it?
That had to be tough. That had to be really tough.
Like, darn. And
I know, because here you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you will not see a poetry book from Deborah Carney. That just isn't going to happen under a pen name or anything else.
Poems are hard.
But writing classes I think are important whether you do online or offline. And if you don't have time to do writing classes, at least find a critique group if you can't find a critique group of other writers, find a critique group of your friends and family that, they're not professional writers so that they can read it and, tell them to be honest and not, that they won't hurt your feelings.
Right.
And, have them read stuff, maybe even a chapter and see if it makes sense to them.
Sure. And sometimes family, it's a little bit more difficult because of the fact that they love you,
Yes.
And so they're going to say, oh, I love your book because like you had said about that. And sometimes taking critique from a stranger is easier. But I absolutely think it's an important process of writing. It really is.
Yeah, and the other thing about, I should have recommended family because the other thing about family is you might be telling personal stories that maybe you're going to not want your mother or daughter to read, and on the other hand, you're going to write them under a pen name because you don't want anybody to know.
That's true.
that you're talking about them.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I know in my book it does take place in a middle school, and like I said, I've worked in a middle school front office for about 6-7 years. So the characters I have are like exaggerations of people I knew. But then, and so you think that, well, maybe if they go below the layers, they're going to know exactly who I was talking to. So that's a little scary too. But you're right. You have to be careful about having family because of those family secrets may come out. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a couple of short stories at this point that are published under pen names.
Oh, okay.
So that, there's stories about mother, relationships with your mother or whatever, and they're things that I don't want my mother to find on a search on the internet.
That's part of being a writer too, and I really respect your bravery because you have to put yourself out there. And what do yes, it stems from the imagination, but there's a lot of basis for that imagination,
Yeah. And, you can't discount your life your real life situations that have happened to you.
No.
They're going to be incorporated in your writing in some way. If you do want to do a book about mothers and daughters, a novel that involves mothers and daughters relationships, it's easier to write it under a pen name, because then even if you're going to fictionalize a lot of it, but you don't want to really offend people.
No, you don't. No, because, you want to be kind in life. No, I understand that, yeah. But, I agree.
Have you written under a pen name, or are you just you?
You know what? No, I have not. I was going back and forth debating whether even using my real name on this. I thought of using my maiden name instead, since I was my maiden name a little bit more than I was my married name. But in the end, I decided just to go with my real name. And at this point in my life, I don't think there's anything really offensive in it. So, I may be wrong.
No one's going to come up to you and slap you in the face, right?
Well, it may happen. I don't know. No, I don't think there is anything because like I said, it's caricatures of people I knew. It's not, the actual people I knew. So.
Right. Very cool.
So, yeah, it is. It's a fun process. I've been finding more difficult is writing the sequel, because you're in a voice for so long that if you switched over to another voice, that's a little hard, because I love Marty's voice. That's the main character's name, so it's kind of hard to divorce myself from Marty's voice right now, but it'll come.
and that's just it. Like you said, the story will be in your head and it will come out. And it's really funny because another friend of mine sat down and wrote a short book, and he looked at me and he said, "I've got part 2 and part 3 already in my head." Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, that's how it works. And by opening himself up to being able to write part 1, all of a sudden the voices are there.
Right.
And, I had it happen to me this summer, where an entire book came to me in my head, but I haven't had time to write it yet. But I've been able to do the character sketches so that when I'm ready...
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So you write with character sketch? Do you write with outlines too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
know that's how you're supposed to write. I know they say that's a very successful way of writing. I just never had my own success with that way. So it always interests me when writers like yourself do character sketches and outlines.
Well, I'm not really doing an outline. I'm doing a character sketch.
All right.
And then what I would like to do is, for that novel, that's just going to be totally off the cuff, but I know who the people are.
Right.
And, they're, like you said, they're going to be a caricature of some real people. Mm-hmm. And so I need to find, an alternate name for them and, build out their character a little bit more. And then on the other hand, my son wrote fiction, and he passed away in a car accident. So he had all this fiction that he wrote.
Okay.
And it's just sitting there.
Okay.
So I want to storyboard. I've already published one of his books as an ebook and a print book, and it gets good reviews. And then there's other people that have read it and said it reads more like a movie script, which is actually what he ended up writing more of, are movie scripts.
Okay.
So what I would like to do is storyboard those books, because I have the characters, I have the situations, and I just need to flesh them out. And in the first novel, in the last 2 chapters, he perfectly set up for the sequel.
Oh, really?
I could actually see the sequel in my head as I was reading the last couple of chapters. I'm like, he didn't address this. He left that hanging.
Right.
And he didn't address that, and he wouldn't have left that hanging. And
what a nice tribute, though, Deborah, to your son's legacy. That's beautiful.
Well, and I hope it works. I published a book of his essays that he wrote while he was in college and in community college, and it's quite funny. And not to promote my own stuff, but the name of the website is weirderthanmarshmallows.com. And he came up with that name, and he built the original website because he thought there was nothing weirder than marshmallows, because if you read the list of ingredients, food coloring blue is in there.
I know.
And marshmallows are white. And he's like, what did they put in there that they had to turn it blue to make it be white? So,
no, you know what? And you know, it depends how you define success. Is it successful because you got his words out there?
Exactly.
You know?
That's my only purpose.
Right. And, you know, and that's, it brought the whole, one of the things why I forged ahead with this, why in those 6 months I was thinking whether I should have Orange Hat or not, is I had a friend, and this kind of goes with your son's, you know, things too, is I had a friend who said to me, what, are you going to just keep it in the computer? Mm-hmm. You know, and she was right. And that's the same thing with your son. Well, but you're getting his words out there, and how beautiful is that, you know? Well,
and not to be, you know, not to bring down things to be sad, a couple of weeks before he passed away, he actually looked at me and said, if something were to happen to me, you know, my girlfriend wants me to take care of her writing. If something were to happen to her, if something were to happen to me, what would happen to my stuff? And I looked him in the eye and I said, the same thing with your fiction, because he switched from writing fiction to writing screenplays. And I'm like, I would do my best to make sure that your work got out there. And that's what's important, you know? And it took me a few years. He's been gone 10 years, and I got his book published last fall on the Kindle, and we're going from there. I'm a photographer, so I do photography books. I'm a sort of a teacher in my main industry, so I've done some nonfiction instructional type books. And this is my fiction. You know, I mean, I was with him during the writing process. Right. So you know. Right. Right.
I think that's really beautiful. I think that's great that you're able to do that, because like I said, otherwise, you know, it would just sit there, and that's not, his memory is still there, you know, so that's great.
Yeah, the book of essays, I don't care if it sells. I just want people to have it, because he was very ironic, and I've had really mixed reviews on the book, which is really good, because like you know, one of the things that we want to do, we want to elicit an emotion from our work.
We do.
You know, whether it's a positive or a negative emotion, it was an emotion, which means you had a reaction, and it made you think.
That's right.
So even though your book isn't a make you think book.
No, but I mean, you know, laughter is the best type of emotion. You
exactly.
know? Happiness or what have you. And so that's, you know, that's the one I'm trying to grab at. So.
Now, if you had, let's say there's a writer that came up to you and that said, you know, Elizabeth, I'm getting started. What should I do? I'm kind of stuck. What should I do? Okay,
I would say write. I mean, the only way you get out of anything in writing is to write. If it's crappy, that's okay. It's you know what not to go, what direction not to go, you know. And so if a writer came up to me and said that she had something already written and what to do, then I would say, you know, you have to put yourself out there, and it's not fun. It's not a fun process at all. Who wants to be rejected, you know? But if you don't try, you'll never get anywhere, and you may not get rejected. But the chances of rejection in writing is like
really high.
Yeah, getting gray hair when you get older. I mean, it's just what it is, you know. But so I guess my two things would put yourself out there and write. I mean, you are a writer, and so you should write.
And what kind of marketing things are you doing? I know Orange Hat is doing a lot of marketing for you because they reached out to me.
Yes.
So what are the kinds of things that you're doing either with them or on your own?
Well, I have a large circle of friends and family. And before that sounds really conceited, I'm the youngest of 7.
Nice.
My husband's the youngest of 6.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah. So between the two of us, we have like 29 nieces and nephews, and, you know, like 23 great. I mean, we have a huge family base. And I live in a small town of Warrenville, Illinois. It's a small suburb outside of Chicago, but it's really more of a town. And when I had my book signing, it's like the town came. I had the mayor come. I had the council people come. It's just so because of this small group of people that I've been blessed to have in my inner circle, they've kind of done a lot of my promotions, which is extremely a blessing, and it's just been wonderful. And so I've been contacting the people that they've kind of said, hey, Rebecca here wants to talk to you about doing her book club. And, and I'm like, okay, I'm game to do that. I do have, I'm talking to someone tomorrow that's a friend of a friend that wants to do a book signing for me at a church, so that's something that I've been reaching out. I've been talking to local bookstores and saying, hey, I got these reviews on Amazon, and what do you say? And it would be great for this neighborhood because I know this, and this people, and I know you know them, and they'll be like, oh, yeah. I've also have contacted different blogs. I had a blog review my book, and successfully it's been reviewed, so that's good. I know that people pay for book reviews. I just don't have the finances right now to do that, so I'm trying to go the cheap route.
Well, and it's the more authentic route also.
I don't know about authenticity because it works for them, right. And some of these reviews do not guarantee a good review. So that's a big, I kind of admire their gumption because they may be paying for it and then they'll get a negative review, and that's harsh, Right. So I've been contacting a few chick lit blogs and different other venues and book review, and there's a book reporter. It's reviewing my book, and I'm hoping, and All About Romance is another book review. I don't have a guarantee that they will read it. I send them, I contact them and pray to the book gods that they glance at my book and say, okay, let's see it, But again, that it from the moment you write a book to the you never stop losing that fear of rejection. You don't, right. And you just have to realize it's part of the process. And, for every, and I think most writers will agree, for every, oh wow, this is great, you're worried about that one person that's going to say, well, this really sucks, and
you're worried that they've got a big following, and there you go, your book is trash.
That's right. I wonder if Nora Roberts sits there and thinks, of all the million readers, that one reader that says, oh wow, you really suck, if that bothers her. It has to, at a certain level, because writing's such a personal thing.
Yep.
So that's the type of promotion I'm doing. I'm using my friends and family. That didn't sound good. No, but
that is exactly. You had. I'm talking to a lot of people that are saying build your platform, and you have a built-in platform because you're from a small town. You have everybody's support. You're a very upbeat person, and utilize that. You're not using them in a bad way. You're utilizing them in a good way.
Well, and that's what I'm hoping. And that's the other thing that I would say, play to your strengths. My strength is I enjoy people. I enjoy going out, and I should have been a politician. Shaking hands and kissing babies or whatever. No, I just enjoy meeting people. And but not a lot of writers are not like that. I know a writer who's very, very shy. Mm-hmm. But her strength is she writes a damn good query letter, right. Because all her emotions and all her words come out in the written word. Mm-hmm. So she could sell anything in a query letter, which is not a strength I have. So you play to what you have to know what your strengths are, and then play to them. So that would be my other one.
Awesome. And one last question.
Sure.
Do you use the social media platforms that are just for books, like Goodreads or Safari or anything like that is specifically for authors and readers?
I've had 2 reviews on Goodreads. One of them is from a blog that reviewed my book very positively. Another one was from a reader that I kind of knew, and they both had written reviews on Goodreads, which was fantastic. I have used Facebook. I have my own Facebook page. I use Twitter, although I'm not real quite certain how to do Twitter, so I'm not... What I have my son who's 16 who knows all of this, so hopefully he'll be able to help me. And then I do have my own blog, which is Write, WRITE, I Belong, Right Where I Belong. And
I saw that, and I was like, that is excellent. Right.
Well, it came from being in this journey. I'll admit, I'm 50 years old, and for a long time, I mean, you can't change your age, so what are you going to do about it? And for a long time, I was very hesitant to do this, but then, I was getting to that age where I thought, no, this is what I want to do, and then my blog came first because I feel the most comfortable writing, and that's right where I belong. I belong right here, writing. And then I thought, you know what, life's too short. I'm just going to go and put myself out there, and it's scary. And it was hard and all that, but what's the alternative? It's just as scary not to put yourself out there, because then you got to live with regrets, and you don't want to
live with it on your computer.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So and then I have my own blog, although I haven't been updating it as much as I should, but I will be. So
and it's still there, so it's still part of your platform.
Right. That's right.
That's really good to know. All right, so you gave us one place to find you. Where else? Is that the main site that you would send people to?
Yes, and also my Facebook page. It's Elizabeth Dudak. I think it's you go on Facebook and you search me under Elizabeth Dudak, and I have some things there. Orange Hat. They will have my whole bio there, and if you want to see a cool cover of a book,
okay,
kind of whimsical, you can go on to Orange Hat and look at the cover there. It's a bright yellow, which kind of Janet Ivanovich-ish, and then my book is on Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and I'm just starting all these social medias and trying to figure it all out. So.
Well, we'll go on that journey with you. We'll check up on you in a couple of months and see how you're doing.
Oh, well, hopefully we can talk again. I've really enjoyed this. You're a very pleasant person to talk to, Deborah.
Well, thank you. That's my strength.
There you go. And you play to it very well.
I have blogs that are full of podcasts because I don't like to sit down. And one of the things that I've noticed is there are a lot of book bloggers or bloggers that have like a form where they like had you go through and fill out the answers to a bunch of questions, and I would rather show your voice. Instead of you just, and those are wonderful for exposure for you and whatnot, but instead of having canned answers, I would much rather be able to have a dialogue with someone and have people hear your voice. Like you said, your tone gets lost if you're in an online course.
It does.
Your tone also gets lost if you're writing on a blog.
You're absolutely right. And sarcasm's kind of hard. There's only so many LOLs and just kiddings that you can throw in without it losing its meaning or what have you. And one of the things that I really appreciated about your podcast is you sit down and you talk, and then it's done, it's not up in the air. Else. No, it's not like up in the air or whatever. You know what you said and you own it, so so I really appreciate it, and I like this venue, so thank you.
Awesome. All right, so all of you people who are listening to us on podcatchers, make sure that you rewind a little bit and find Elizabeth's websites there. And also go to bloggingabcs.com and search for Elizabeth. I'm going to say it wrong, so I'm just going to say
Dudak.
Search for Elizabeth, and you'll find her, Elizabeth Dudak, and you will find the podcast, and you can make comments and leave us comments. Let us know if you got our book and what you thought about it, and also there is a Be Our Guest form that you can fill out, and for the authors listening, we have a Tell Us About Your Book tab, so go fill out a form that will tell us about your book, and then you can either request to be a podcast guest, or you can just, leave your book info out there for people to find you.
And it's a lot of fun.
if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. So
Good.
You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/BookGoodies. And we want to thank Geekcast, GeekCast.fm, where you can also find all of our podcasts and a lot of other podcasts about internet marketing and marketing in general. And you can find me personally at DeborahCarney.com or at twitter.com/Loxley, LOXLY. And we want to thank all of you for listening, and we want you to get writing and have a great day.
Right on. Ha ha.